Most people know the story of Noah's Ark, right? The big flood and all that. But have you ever thought about Noah as a father? Today we're diving deep into the story of Ham, one of Noah's sons. Who gets cursed for something that, honestly, what makes you wonder if Noah was really such a great dad after all?
Yeah.
We're exploring all this based on this text. Ham's sin should terrify us. This is why Noah cursed his own son. And let me tell you, this text is intense. It really gets you thinking about what it means to be righteous, about family dynamics, and the impact our choices have for generations.
Yeah, it's amazing how the story, it's been around for thousands of years, but it still makes us question our ideas about good parenting and sin.
Okay, so I guess we should start with a quick recap of the story of Noah's Ark. For anyone who might need a refresher, we all know about the flood, right? God wiping out almost everything. And Noah chosen to repopulate the world because he was righteous. But this text really digs into what Noah's righteousness means. Was he actually a good guy or just good at following rules?
Well, the text describes Noah as blameless in his generation. And that suggests he was doing more than just avoiding bad stuff. Like, he actually walked with God, which means he had a relationship with God, a real connection. That set him apart from everyone else.
So even in a world full of wickedness,
Yeah.
Noah stood out. It must have been a lot of pressure, though, to be like the only survivor,
Yeah.
tasked with rebuilding everything.
Oh, yeah, imagine the pressure. Every single decision must have felt huge, knowing you're basically starting humanity over from scratch. And that's where the story takes this really interesting turn with Noah's son, Ham.
Right. The story picks up after the flood is over, and things seem to be settling down. But then there's this incident. Ham sees his father, Noah, passed out naked in his tent. And we know that uncovering nakedness in the Bible, it means more than just seeing someone naked, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's like a violation, going against what's considered right, both in society and within a family. That's why the text compares this to Adam and Eve and their shame after sinning in the Garden of Eden. Both stories are about being exposed, losing innocence, and messing up the way things are supposed to be.
So it's not just about seeing someone naked. It's about something deeper, like disrespect or maybe challenging who's in control.
That's a great point. It makes you wonder about Noah and Ham's relationship. Was there some bad blood between them? Did Ham feel any kind of satisfaction, maybe even some twisted sense of power, seeing his supposedly perfect father in such a vulnerable state?
Well, if we're thinking about the Noah might be a bad dad idea, it's not hard to imagine some typical teenage angst playing a part in what Ham did. Maybe he felt overshadowed by Noah's righteousness, or maybe they had fought before. Or maybe he just saw a chance to take his father down a notch.
Yeah, the text doesn't say much about their past relationship, but it does hint that there was something more going on. I mean, why else would Ham not only see his father naked, but then go tell his brothers about it? He's making a point of spreading the shame, trying to get others involved in humiliating his father.
Yeah, that's what I find so interesting. Ham doesn't just see it and move on. He reacts in a very specific way. He could have easily just covered his dad up quietly, acted like it never happened. But instead, he chooses to expose Noah. What does that tell us about human nature? About how we sometimes want to tear other people down, especially those we see as better than us?
It's a classic struggle, right? Envy and resentment, wanting to level the playing field, even if it means doing something wrong to do it. This story might be from ancient times, but it shows dynamics that are still so relevant today.
And then you've got the other brothers, Shem and Japheth. They hear about what happened, and they immediately grab a garment, walk backwards into the tent so they don't see their dad naked, and cover him up. Talk about showing respect.
It's such a powerful image, right? They choose to protect their father's dignity, even when he's messed up. Their actions really show they understand how important it is to honor your parents, right, no matter their flaws.
So we had these two completely opposite reactions to the same situation, which leads to some pretty interesting questions. Are Shem and Japheth really more righteous than Ham? Or are they just better at following the rules?
That's a debate that's been going on for ages. The text doesn't really give us a clear answer, but it does present these different actions as a turning point in the story. It's almost like what they chose to do in that moment sets things in motion that will affect generations to come.
And speaking of things that affect generations, we can't ignore what happens next. The curse Noah puts on Ham's son, Canaan.
Right. That's where things take a really dark turn. Noah wakes up, finds out what happened, and he says these really chilling words. Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be to his brothers.
Oh, hold on a second. He curses his grandson, not even Ham himself. What's going on there?
Well, that's where the theological debate gets really interesting. Some scholars think Noah was basically speaking for God in that moment, like he was channeling God's judgment. Others say it was a prophetic curse, Like Noah was seeing a vision of the future, where Canaan's descendants would be ruled over by the Israelites.
So either Noah had a direct line to God, or he was seeing visions of future oppression. Either way, pretty intense stuff. But it makes you wonder about this whole idea of generational curses. Is it really a thing? Like, do the sins of the father actually get passed down to the children? Or is it more symbolic, like a way of saying our actions have consequences that last a long time?
That's another question theologians have been grappling with for centuries. There's some good arguments on both sides. Some people believe generational curses are a real spiritual thing, a consequence of breaking God's covenant. Others see them as a literary tool, a way to emphasize how sin has lasting effects and how much we need redemption.
But this idea that our choices can have consequences that go way beyond us, affect our families and future generations, it's pretty mind-blowing.
It is. It makes you think about every choice we make, not just for ourselves, but for our kids, for everyone who comes after us.
Okay, so let's recap. We've got Noah, this righteous dude, but maybe not the best dad. Then there's Ham, the rebellious son who might have had some ulterior motives. And then Shem and Japheth, the good sons upholding the family honor. And over all of this, there's this curse hanging in the air, making us ask questions about God's judgment, about prophecies, and about what sin really is and what it leads to.
And we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to unpack in this story.
We're just getting started. Get ready, because in part 2, we're going even deeper into the theological and philosophical stuff. It's going to be a wild ride.
So, last time we were talking about Ham's actions and how the text compares them to Adam and Eve's sin. It's not saying they're exactly the same, but is highlighting some interesting similarities that add a whole other layer of meaning to the story.
Yeah, I'm really curious about that. It seems like every little detail in this story has some deeper meaning hidden beneath the surface.
Exactly. If you think about it, both Eve and Ham were kind of deceived by what they saw. Eve was drawn to the forbidden fruit because it looked appealing, right? It was tempting to her senses and her mind. And in a similar way, the text suggests that Ham might have been enticed by seeing his father naked. It makes you wonder if there was something more to it than just a simple act of observation.
So you're saying there might be a deeper level of sin here, some that echoes that first act of disobedience in the Garden of Eden, like maybe Ham did something more deliberate than we initially thought.
That's the beauty of this story. It makes us read between the lines, think about the characters' motivations, and the underlying tensions that might be driving their actions. And here's another interesting parallel. Both Eve and Ham tried to get others involved in what they did. Eve convinced Adam to eat the fruit, sharing the blame for their disobedience. And Ham went and told his brothers about Noah, as if he wanted them to be part of it too. Maybe he was looking for validation, or even trying to implicate them in his own wrongdoing.
Right, it's like he's trying to spread the guilt around instead of taking responsibility for his own actions. But you mentioned earlier that there's a key difference between these two scenarios. Adam gave in to Eve's persuasion, while Shem and Japheth resisted Ham's attempt to drag them into it.
Exactly. And that difference is really significant. It shows the power of choice. Even when we're tempted to do wrong, Shem and Japheth could have easily joined Ham in mocking their father, but they made a different choice, one that showed their own moral compass and their respect for their family.
So we're seeing this theme of temptation and choice play out on multiple levels within the story. It's not just about Ham's.
Right.
It's about how those around him respond to it. And ultimately, their choices have consequences that ripple outward and shape everything that happens next.
And that brings us back to this idea of generational curses, which is a topic that often sparks a lot of debate. The text suggests that the impact of our choices, both good and bad, can extend far beyond our own lifetimes, influencing the destinies of our families and descendants.
It's a heavy concept, right? And it's been used in some pretty messed up ways throughout history to justify oppression and discrimination. But is there a way to understand generational curses without falling into those problematic interpretations?
I think so. I think it helps to view generational curses, not as some kind of deterministic force that locks us into a predetermined fate, but rather as a way of understanding the complex relationship between our choices, the consequences that follow, and the legacy we leave behind for future generations.
So it's not about some magical curse that condemns entire families. It's more about understanding how our actions can create patterns that get passed down over time.
Exactly. Think about things like inherited trauma, or societal structures that perpetuate inequality, or even family dynamics that repeat themselves across generations. These are all examples of how the past can have a lasting impact, influencing the present and the future.
It's like we're all carrying around this backpack, filled with the choices and experiences of those who came before us. Some of that baggage might be positive, giving us strength and support, but other parts might weigh us down, creating obstacles we have to overcome.
I love that analogy. It really highlights the importance of self-awareness, understanding the historical and familial forces that have shaped us. Once we recognize those patterns, we can start to make conscious choices about how we engage with them.
So it's about taking ownership of the backpack, acknowledging what's inside, and then deciding what we want to keep and what we want to let go of.
Exactly. It's a powerful concept, but it takes courage and introspection and a willingness to challenge our beliefs and habits.
And in the midst of all this talk about sin and curses, this text also offers a glimmer of hope, right? It's not all doom and gloom.
Absolutely. The story of Ham might be full of darkness and consequences, but ultimately it points us towards grace. The text emphasizes that Jesus, through his sacrifice, broke the curse of sin that we inherited from Adam.
So even though we might be carrying those metaphorical backpacks filled with past transgressions, there's the way to unpack them, to let go of the burdens that are holding us back.
Exactly. It's this incredible idea of a divine exchange, where Jesus took the punishment for our sins, offering us forgiveness and eternal life in return. It's a reminder that no matter how far we fall, no matter what we're carrying, God's grace is always there for us.
So the story starts with a curse, but it ends with a promise of redemption. It's like saying, yes, the past has power, but it doesn't have to define us. We can choose to step into a new reality, one that's full of grace and forgiveness.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It really highlights how powerful faith can be. It can give us the strength to break free from the past and embrace a future filled with hope and possibility.
This is all really thought-provoking, but honestly, I'm still struggling with this idea of Noah being a bad dad. I mean, the guy built an ark. He saved humanity. Surely that counts for something in the parenting department, right?
I hear you. It's easy to judge Noah based on what we consider good parenting today, but we have to remember the cultural context of the time. Parenting styles have changed a lot over the centuries.
Okay, fair enough. But even considering that, the text does seem to criticize Noah's parenting. It's like it's saying just being a good person doesn't automatically make you a good parent.
That's right, and that's what makes the story so interesting. It challenges our assumptions. It suggests that being a good parent takes more than just being good. It takes intentionality, wisdom, and a willingness to guide and discipline our children, even when it's hard.
So it's not enough to just love your kids and provide for them. You have to actually help them develop their character, teach them right from wrong, help them figure out their own moral compass.
Exactly. And the text hints that Noah might have missed the mark on that, even though he was righteous. Maybe he was so focused on his relationship with God that he neglected his own family, or maybe he was too quick to judge and punish, like we see with the curse he puts on Canaan.
That's interesting. Maybe Noah's own experience with God shaped his parenting style. Did he see God as a strict disciplinarian and feel like he had to be the same way with his kids? Or was there a disconnect between his spiritual life and his role as a father?
Those are great questions, and they're exactly the kind of questions this text makes us ask. It reminds us that even the most devout people can struggle with parenting, and that being righteous doesn't always mean you'll be a wise or good parent.
So we end up with this complex picture of Noah, a man chosen by God, but maybe not the best role model when it comes to fatherhood.
That's right. It reminds us that even the most heroic figures in the Bible were still human, with their strengths and weaknesses, their triumphs and failures.
This conversation has been a whirlwind. We've gone from the depths of human sin to the heights of divine grace, and we've done it all through this one story that's been passed down for thousands of years. I can't wait to see what other insights we uncover in part 3. Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the story of Ham. We've explored a lot of the psychological and theological stuff, but now I want to get into the actual text itself, like really dig into the words.
Yeah, let's do it. There's something about going back to the original source. Especially with stories that have been interpreted so many different ways over the centuries, we can cut through all the noise and get to the heart of the matter, the verses that have sparked all the debate.
Sounds good to me. Lead the way.
All right, so the key passage here is in Genesis 9:12 to 27. It says, "And Noah began to be an husbandman, and he planted a vineyard. And he drank of the wine and was drunken, and he was uncovered within his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and told his 2 brethren without. And Shem and Japheth took a garment, and laid it upon both their shoulders, and went backward, and covered the nakedness of their father. And their faces were backward, and they saw not their father's nakedness. And Noah awoke from his wine, and knew what his younger son had done unto him. And he said, Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren. And he said, Blessed be the Lord God of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. God shall enlarge Japheth, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant.
Wow, okay, so there's a lot there, obviously. But one thing that really struck me is how casually the text mentions Noah getting drunk. Like it just says, oh yeah, Noah got totally wasted. You know the guy who saved humanity from a global flood?
It is interesting, right? The text doesn't try to hide Noah's human weaknesses. Even after he's been chosen by God for this incredibly important task, it's like a reminder that even the most righteous people aren't perfect. They can still mess up.
And that's something we've been talking about a lot, this idea that righteousness doesn't mean you're flawless, that even people who are close to God can make mistakes.
Yeah.
But it makes me wonder, did Noah's actions, him getting drunk, did that affect his covenant with God? Or was it just a personal failing, something that didn't have any spiritual consequences?
That's a big question, and there are a few different perspectives on it. Some theologians think Noah's actions did have spiritual consequences, like his drunkenness was a sign of backsliding, a failure to live up to what was expected of him. Others say God's covenant with Noah was unconditional, that his human failings didn't change God's promise.
It's amazing to think about how this one incident, this moment of human weakness, has caused so much debate and discussion for centuries. It shows how powerful these stories can be, how they can spark questions and challenge our assumptions about God, about ourselves, and about what faith really means.
Absolutely. It reminds us that we need to approach these texts with humility, recognizing that there are different perspectives and interpretations. It's not about finding all the answers. It's about engaging with the ideas, wrestling with them,
and allowing them to challenge and shape us.
And speaking of challenging ideas, we need to talk about the curse itself, what Noah says to Canaan. It's pretty harsh. And it's hard to reconcile that with the message of love and forgiveness that we often associate with faith. How has this story been used to justify things like slavery and racism throughout history? And how do we as modern readers deal with that legacy? That's an important question, and it's one we can't ignore. Unfortunately, the story of Ham has been twisted and used to support systems of oppression and racial hierarchy. The curse on Canaan has been used to justify the enslavement of people of African descent, claiming they were the descendants of Ham, and therefore destined to be servants.
It's really disturbing to see how a story that's essentially about family relationships and choices has been weaponized to hurt and dehumanize entire groups of people. It shows how easy it is for religious texts to be manipulated, to serve agendas that have nothing to do with love and compassion.
It's a reminder that we need to read these texts critically, understanding the historical context and the ways in which they've been used and misused throughout history. We need to be aware of potential biases and interpretations that reflect the power dynamics of the time.
It also makes me think about our responsibility to challenge those harmful interpretations, to reclaim these narratives, and reframe them in a way that honors everyone's dignity. We can't let these ancient stories be used to divide and oppress people.
Exactly. We need to recognize the power these stories have, to shape how we see the world. And we need to use that power for good, to promote justice, equality, and compassion.
Okay, so we've talked about the problems with how this story has been interpreted, but let's go back to the text for a second. Why do you think Noah curses Canaan, Ham's son, instead of cursing Ham directly? Was it more than just him being angry?
There are a few different theories about that. Some scholars think it suggests Canaan was actually more guilty, like maybe he did something worse to Noah than what's explicitly mentioned in the text. Others believe it was a prophetic curse, that Noah was foretelling the future subjugation of the Canaanites by the Israelites.
So either Canaan was secretly pulling the strings, or Noah suddenly became a prophet. It definitely adds another layer to the story. But I gotta be honest, this whole idea of generational curses is still kind of confusing for me. Like, are they actually real? Do the sins of the father literally get passed down to the children? Or is it more of a metaphor? A way of saying that our actions have long-lasting consequences?
That's a question that's been debated for a really long time, and there's no simple answer. Some people believe generational curses are a real spiritual phenomenon, a consequence of breaking God's covenant. Others see them more as a literary device, a way to highlight the lasting impact of sin and how much we need redemption.
It definitely makes you think about the long-term effects of our choices, not just for us, but for everyone who comes after us.
Yeah.
But if we take the idea of generational curses too literally, doesn't that kind of undermine the idea of personal responsibility and free will?
That's a valid point. I think we need to be careful. and approach this idea with nuance. We can acknowledge that our actions have consequences that can affect future generations. Without saying that people are destined to repeat the sins of their ancestors, we always have the capacity to make our own choices, to grow.
And to break free from harmful patterns.
So it's more about understanding how history and family shape us, the baggage we inherit,
Yeah.
and then making our own choices about how to deal with it. That's a great way to put it. It's about recognizing the influence of the past without letting it control our future. We can acknowledge the hurts, the injustices, the patterns that have been passed down, and then choose to heal, to create a new story, and to build a better future for ourselves and for generations to come.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive, full of surprises and new perspectives. We've gone from the depths of human sin to the complexities of family, to the idea of prophetic visions, and ultimately to the hope of redemption. So as we wrap up, what are your main takeaways for our listeners?
I think the story of Ham, even with all its darkness and ambiguity, points us towards hope and transformation. It reminds us that even when we're broken, even when we make mistakes, God's grace is always there for us.
It's a powerful reminder that we're not defined by our past, by our ancestors' mistakes, or even by our own failings. We have the power to choose, to break free from destructive patterns, and to embrace a future full of hope.
And maybe most importantly, it encourages us to read these ancient texts with an open mind and heart, to recognize that they have multiple layers of meaning, and that they can speak to us in profound ways if we're willing to listen.
Well said. I think we've successfully navigated the choppy waters of this biblical tale. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the story of Ham. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking truth.